Yeah, and we've got a couple people that are waiting on to get through the gate. But here, let's just back up and check out the show here with the artist Annie Liu. And I suppose I should introduce this phenomenal artist slash scientist. She is a BA graduate from Dartmouth. She's received her Master's of Science in Architecture from Harvard and a Master's in Science and Media from MIT. She's shown at places in the Queen's Biennial, she's shown in Amsterdam, she's shown in Shenzhen, and she's had a lot of experiences getting written up in science mags like National Geographic, Wired Magazine, PBS, and all sorts of phenomenal accomplishments thus far. She's a NIFA Grant Award winner, and she's also going to be going to the Venice Biennale 2021. Here we are. What month? Representing the video game that we'll talk about in a little bit. It's over my shoulder. Thank you so much for joining us here at Elijah Weed Showroom in Newburgh, New York. I'm going to turn it over to Annie, and she's going to tell us more about her show, Pixelated Slaps to the Heart, a search, remnants from a search in the ghost machine, in the meat machine.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and for being here. I know it's been a crazy couple of days, so I feel really grateful to share this with you. Please let me know if you can't hear me, because I know this is a weird time and I'm wearing a mask and it's a big space. Today I wanted to share with you this piece called A Search for the Ghost in the Meat Machine, a piece that I made in 2018 through an award that I won, a grant called the Biological Art and Design Award in the Netherlands, where I was paired with scientists, in my case radiologists, to create a new body of work. For this piece, I started by investigating the relationships that because I was paired with radiologists, I was really interested in the ways that bodies and minds are represented in medical texts over time. Particularly how the mind is represented. I think it's a fairly age-old question, this kind of mind-body dualism. Like, where does the seat of us reside? Is it in the material, in the body, or is it something else, something like in the soul? And I was very interested in this question because even though science and technology has progressed quite a bit, there is still, from my understanding, no specific scientific evidence of what makes sentience per se. Like, we don't know what that molecule is, we don't know how it arises, we don't know if we can get the same molecular ingredients together, whether we can recreate it in a lab. And I guess at the same time I was asking these questions, I was really interested in how these depictions are influenced by the technological era that we're situated in. And I guess to bring it back down to reality, instead of talking about philosophy all night, I've been thinking about this piece a lot more recently, given that we all seem to live in the digital, the way I'm talking to you over Zoom. Throughout the course of making this piece, I thought a lot about where identity lies, whether we can be quantified. And I think that a big part of my interest in doing this is that I was working with radiologists that were scanning every crevice of my body. And at the same time, I was also, I guess at the time, unpacking all of the knowledge that Google and Facebook had about me. I was really analyzing my data and trying to find where the seat of me lies. So this piece is a series of self-portraits. All of them are exactly my height, maybe not exactly if I'm wearing shoes. Each of these vitrines are my volume, my body's volume if you were to blend me up and pour me out. And each of them considers what it means to be sentient from different points of view based on conversations that I had with neuroscientists, psychologists, radiologists, data scientists. So in the corner of this grid, there are 9 tanks that have screens submerged in a non-conductive fluid. And within each of the screens, I ask these questions that I just posed. So I guess to go back to the idea that they're all submerged, I think, I mean, anyone who's worked with electronics, I think, feels a little bit uncomfortable seeing all of these things wet. And I think during the time of making this piece, I started to really think of myself as a wet machine. I started to ask, how much of myself is quantifiable? Am I an algorithm with enough computing power? Could I be recreated? I think in science fiction, you see these tropes asked a lot, like, can the mind be uploaded, for instance? And so in the corner of each of these are various screens playing different videos that have different sorts of data about my body. Maybe we can walk towards the back, towards one of these. For instance, this is a video that is looping a 3D model of my head, including my brain, down to the details of my veins. This video will loop, and at some point it will play a video that is flashing at 40 hertz. And that's the case because at the time I was making this piece, I was really interested in the idea of entrainment, which is a phenomenon by which all of our brainwaves would sync up if we looked at the same visual phenomena. And at the time I was talking to a scientist named Ed Boyden and Grace Law, and they were doing an experiment where they would put participants in a sound and light bath, and they were trying to cure Alzheimer's through this technique. And I think as a visual artist, it really blew my mind, the thought that looking at something aesthetic could literally change your brain, and sometimes your health. There are other pieces here where I consider what identity is. This is the kind of classic selfie ring, and inside of it is a 3D print of a circular DNA, which is the form of a plasmid, which is often used for genetic engineering. I was looking a lot at metaphors related to jewelry and heirlooms, and I don't know, I guess I was thinking about what it means to pass down these genetic heirlooms and what it means at a time of CRISPR where you can edit these heirlooms and genes. Let's see. There are some edits in addition to this piece that I added in 2020. Very down in the center. This is an IV bag containing a computer that runs some code that pulls basically every tweet that's been tagged with COVID. And I think when I think about identity and personhood and how I understand reality, this year, or I guess last year in 2020, during the pandemic and during the election, it felt like I was glued to a feed, to endless feeds. And I don't know, thinking a lot about how we often consider the digital separate from the biological, but you know, everything that we encounter sends us into kind of a chemical and molecular waterfall. Like every time I look at the screen, I probably get a little bit of dopamine, and I was really thinking about this kind of feedback loop between my body and the digital and the algorithms that control, I guess, these psychologies. And then also is a new addition in 2020. It's a 3D print of the molecular structure of COVID-19. And with this one, I guess I was just reflecting on my own relationship to the unknown. Throughout 2020, I think I read endless amounts of papers about viruses, about COVID-19. I think like many people, I just read everything I could because there was just so much unknown and so much I couldn't control about what was happening in my life. I just think about that too, just the general relationship between humans and emotions and logic and knowledge. And I guess visual representation too. I remember being very excited about getting this 3D print to be able to hold this thing that has destroyed and wrecked so many lives in my hand and kind of examine it and trying to ask myself the thresholds between what I know and what I could do about it. Yeah, I think that all in all, I made this set to kind of ask my questions out loud, and I continue to. I'm open to, do you have a question? Okay. I'm really open to making it more conversational and asking any, or answering any specific questions you might have about some of the pieces. I must admit that I'm not used to giving Zoom talks in this format. So,
Yeah.
Forgive me for mumbling.
Annie, will you tell us about this piece that has this kind of creature-like?
Yes. Good question. We'll skip over this. This sculpture is a 3D print of my corpus callosum, which is a part of your brain that connects the left and right halves. And it's connected to two capsules that contain the antennas from cell phones. And with this one, I was thinking a lot about connectivity, both connectivity within my own body and then the connectivity beyond. And this 3D print was actually taken from a scan of my own brain. And I guess one of the interesting technical aspects of it was just creating this data file too. What else can I say about this?
So the data file too, you explained to me, I learned something new always, when we've been talking for over a year now about this show, pre-COVID, right? I learned through the installation that there are pixels and there are voxels.
Yes. That was something that was really interesting to me, learning more about MRIs. Because an MRI captures a three-dimensional, data set about your body. So the way a photograph or an X-ray might be an array of pixels, which have 2 dimensions, MRIs will capture a 3-dimensional voxel, like little cubes of your body. And actually found that the way it works to be very interesting too. When you enter an MRI machine, there are very powerful magnets that align and then unalign. And what happens is all the water molecules in your body are ionized and they will also align. So when the magnet is on, they will all point like HHO like this. And then when the magnet's off, it'll snap back into place. And then that difference in energy gets captured by a sensor in the machine.
Could you feel it happening? Could you tell when you are being ionized? And
To tell you the truth, no. But it felt like I was at a rave because the magnets are so loud and you can really feel the pulse of the sound like deep in your bones and in your body. And I actually found it really soothing. I was really curious. I had some friends who expressed some concern about my getting so many MRIs to disturb my electromagnetic field. But I must just very candidly admit that I didn't notice. But I did really love something about water being the primary ingredient that was being used to communicate. And I guess you see that water is very prevalent in the whole installation materially. Yeah.
Annie, how important is the water in relationship to the actual sculpture? For instance, when we were installing it, I guess I'm digging at this idea of, say, someone's very interested in having one of these in a gallery, a museum, in their home. Would you want them to have this Newburgh tap water, or would you like some Fiji fresh, or is the water site specific, I suppose?
Yeah, I suppose it's funny. So I've installed this in Eindhoven, the Netherlands, and here in Newburgh. And the water quality is quite different from location to location. It settles different, and you can see here that microorganisms have also started to grow and procreate in it. I consider it site specific. I like, honestly, as someone who does work with biological media often, I like the disobedience of living things. I like these little quirks that I can't control. In the beginning, the first time I installed it, it was quite concerning to me. But yes, I do believe that it is site specific and lovely in that way, I guess, that each iteration of it is different, just how you and I would change if we traveled to different places. I think it reflects that. Yeah, on an aside, I do other work about the microbiome, which is all of the living organisms that live on and in you and how they change your identity. So I kind of like the idea, thinking out loud, that this piece has its own microbiome in a way.
We get the train.
Guest appearance from the train, streaker.
There's also little coronavirus parts floating around in some of the tanks. Like, will you talk about that?
It's true.
Maybe over.
At the time that I was making this, I was particularly interested in the antibody. And these are all 3D prints of the COVID-19 antibody. And again, I don't know. It was one of those things where having them 3D printed and held in my hand felt like almost like a comforting talisman. Again, I think it's interesting to me how different people understand things. Like, I tend to be a very physical person. I like to see things. When I was in school, I always had to see a diagram of something to understand it. So I don't know, for me, as someone who works a lot between art and science, I think it's interesting how knowledge is understood and embodied, and how the physical representation of things plays into that. So yeah, I have sprinkled the exhibit with antibodies.
I know, I'm glad. And I also know you are interested in the passing on of the DNA, and I was curious about this box in here because it also has like a sentimentality feel to it.
Yeah. This was one of the original iterations of the thoughts that I was thinking about in terms of the selfie with plasmids and genetic heirlooms and the genetic passing on of things. I suppose in talking about COVID and everything, in addition to having a microbiome, we also have a virome. All of us have a lot of viruses that have co-made us. So at the time that I was making this in 2018, I was thinking about these things, like all of the things that co-make us. I'm very interested in the obliteration of a kind of egocentric identity where I'm just one species or one person, and kind of thinking of holistically, not just looking at things like microorganisms, but literally viruses too that shaped our histories. So yeah, this one is in a jewelry box. Again, I'm thinking of the plasmid as a kind of jewelry heirloom that you pass on. And again, this one has also been adapted, both with the microbiome of Newberg and also some of the antibody talismans. Yeah.
And then we know that this sculpture, the installation contains 9 sculptures, right? And then you've cornered the mass of the 9 with videos in each corner. Can you talk a little bit about that choice?
Yeah. I mean, when I was making, one of the things about making this piece was that I had so much data about myself, and there was a moment where I had to think about how to represent this data in physicality. Like, it could all just exist on a hard drive, and I suppose I could put it on a pedestal and make a different statement about what it might mean to be human. But instead I wanted to articulate them somehow visually with these kind of wet machines. And so this whole piece is anchored on the corners with these videos that contain different data about my body and both the data and actually the interface that the data lives in. So I was very interested in how the tools shape the knowledge and back and forth.
And then I can't help but notice the very analogous wires and such in these corner pieces, like neuroganglia of sorts coming out of this central brain, I suppose, or box with the equipment submerged. Can you talk a little about your choice in submerging the equipment that you're using to broadcast on the screen, the media, within that understanding of like the analogy between the neural ganglia, the brain, and you know the type of liquids that you're using.
Yeah, I mean, in general in my work, I prefer to have all of the electronics exposed. And I guess there's just so much about the way we consume our media and digital media and our relationship to technology that's so opaque. And I wanted to expose it. And I also, I guess for me, always wanted the cords to go up kind of like an umbilical cord and also like a network to kind of bring these technological bits back into bodily metaphors. And like you mentioned, because I was looking at so many scans of my brain, I was looking at things like neural nets and neurons and how things are held together to create meaning. So all of the inner workings are exposed in this kind of raw way. Yeah.
And I know your work is ever so relevant today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Yet I just wonder, you know, could you speak, if you're interested at all, on, you know, some of the data privacy we're getting at, you know, early on in relationship to our data, or like this surveillance capitalism? Have you thought about that, or like the rules and regulations now that are just like, it's a wild, wild west when it comes to what happens to our data? Like it's unventured territory, I suppose.
Yeah. I guess as a woman, I think a lot about commodified bodies, and right now an extension of that being the self commodified as data, and all of the exchanges we make. Like clearly I'm on social media. I feel like as an artist, it's part of my goal to get my work out there, but I know that as an exchange, there's a surveillance on me, and not only that, everything that I contribute to it will be sold. Like even this conversation, I'm sure maybe some of you will get an ad about MRIs later, or fish tanks, I don't know. And it is troubling, right? I don't know, I think about it a lot. I don't have any good answers. There is, I think, a desire to make life more frictionless, right? Like I think part of it is, isn't it convenient that you talked about cat food and now you have a coupon for cat food? And then on the other hand, there's something like, shouldn't privacy be a basic right? Like, shouldn't I have the right to my own data? And I don't know, like for instance, maybe this is on a tangent. When I had my wisdom teeth removed, I wanted my teeth back for an artwork, but the doctor claimed it as biohazardous waste.
Oh my gosh.
And sometimes when you go to, depending on kind of what insurance you have, there is data that your doctor can take from you and not give back to you. And so it doesn't just exist in the realm of social media or online activity. And so I don't know, these trade-offs are kind of tough. I actually spent a year, or almost a year, only using Tor browsers, so I couldn't be tracked as much. And I would say that the trade-off is a lot more friction, right? Like I couldn't get to the things I was searching for as quickly. Sometimes they would be returned in languages I couldn't read. And so, I don't know. My hope is that there's a way that we can collaborate better collectively that's less like one-way exploitative. But yeah, these are questions that I definitely ask and think about. I think the other aspect of this piece that where it comes up is that sometimes I think I am not my data, so maybe it's not like you stealing a bit of me. I guess I think about other technologies in which people, when they first came out, when photography first came out, people were very shy to have their photographs taken because they felt like you were capturing a bit of their soul. And I must admit that my mother felt that way when I was getting MRIs too. She was like, you shouldn't lay yourself bare like this so frequently. And I guess I wonder a little bit too, like maybe my daughter at some point in the future will be like, this data means nothing. It's just not that an intimate part of me, and I don't mind giving it up for kind of smoothness. But yeah, I don't know. I think there is definitely exploitative uses of it too. So I think it's a good question, and one that we should always be mindful of and continue to ask. Yeah.
So much regulation really needs to start being considered, since it has been the Wild West, as I was referring to it. I also wanted to ask you about, you're creating these sculptures out of the data that you've from your own self, but also your working mind in relationship to the biome and other ideas. Yet you're also a coder. You're a woman that codes, and you're behind the scenes creating other things. And I was thinking maybe it would be a good time to address shapes and ladders.
Yes.
The battle of bias and bureaucracy.
Should we walk closer to it? But
Let's
I
do
guess
that.
I'm worried that the sound will also.
We can pop the headphones in.
Sounds good.
It is kind of nice to hear the sound. To get a taste of it. Yeah, so can we start with the installation
Yes.
of this in this space, and then to the game?
I think maybe first it would make sense for me to give a brief overview so that the installation makes
course.
sense. So this is one of my most recent works that I'm actually still working on. It's a video game called Shapes and Ladders, Battles of Bias and Bureaucracy. And this is a video game where I'm trying to explore and address and educate both myself and general audience about issues of systemic racism and sexism. And so it's a video game that takes place in an office building as a metaphor for climbing the career ladder, which is why it's installed in a cubicle. I wanted the visitor to be immersed in the world. I also wanted to acknowledge that I'm working with a small team to build this, Andrea Lee, Michelle Lim, and John Alloy. And we've been working on this since May of this year. And so the idea is that you play this game, you're born into the game as a circle, triangle, or square. You don't get to choose your shape. And based on the shape that you're born as, you have different privileges in walking through it. For instance, circles are more likely to encounter sexual assault. Triangles are more likely to die of COVID. All of these are statistics taken from real life to try to give the player a kind of first-person point of view of structural inequalities. Certain shapes have access to certain types of platforms while others don't, and so on and so forth. And I'm currently working on it. Yeah, I'm currently continuing to develop it, so I'm excited for you all to try it and give feedback because I'm still actively building it. Yeah.
And so what level are we playing, and should we look at the structure of the game prior to playing or after?
Yeah, this is the middle level, level 3. A big emphasis in this level is gender inequality. So for instance, if you encounter a gender neutral bathroom, you'll get more health. A circular player will often find themselves kind of stuck on a sticky tile that represents a time penalty of doing things like housework and childcare, literally a second shift in the game. There are things like maternity leave that might make your experience of the game better. Yeah, it's also a maze. And so in the cubicle, there are little things that help you. There's a fire escape plan that is a map of all the levels. There's some employee onboarding checklists that help you understand the architecture of the world. And there are letters from senior managers to kind of set the tone for the game. Yeah, I hope to have it web hosted soon so that it can be more accessible to a wider audience.
Let's go look at the other structure of the whole game, the architectural.
So you can see here a drawing of all of the levels of the game. I don't know if you can see clearly, but each colored band is a different level. So you start in the lobby and you proceed through a job interview, and then you enter as someone who works in the mail room, then you move up to the server room, and so on and so forth until you get to the glassy corner penthouse office. And the emphasis on that level is on implicit bias and the kind of mentors that you can attract, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I'm thinking a lot currently about how to help players who play this game enact change. So I think there's one thing about, giving someone a taste of what different people go through in life, but then I'm really trying to find ways in which it can be actionable. So for instance, maybe after you encounter a food stamp in the game, at the end of the game you can learn about how to apply for public resources, or maybe you'll learn how to donate to a food bank. So yeah, I'm really open to suggestions. Like, I'm really trying to brainstorm collectively. Some aspects of the game come from my own personal narrative, and I'm really keen on hearing other people's experiences so that I can include it. I'm trying to translate it to other languages such as Spanish and Chinese. So yeah, there are lots of things in the works. This is really early days for the game.
Yeah, the game is what will go to the Biennale de Venezia. And do you know what month they're talking right now? I know it's been
Honestly,
pushed
I have no
forward
idea.
and backward. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns still. Tentatively, it's supposed to open in May,
Oh wow. Okay.
but who knows?
And then that at the Biennale will have all levels.
It will have all levels. And,
How do you I know we talked about this. How do you intend to present it there?
Yeah, it's tough. Still open conversation, because due to COVID, nothing in the exhibition can be touched anymore. So originally it was going to be an installation where visitors could actively play side by side, and you can also see, like, this is the journey of a square versus a triangle, and so on and so forth. So I've been working hard to figure out how to make a touchless game, whether it be gesture, whether it's foot pedals, or perhaps simply just a QR code that you scan to play on your phone or something like that. I am trying to avoid that because I feel like we're already so isolated, and why recreate that in an exhibition? But there are just technical challenges to it too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The idea of certainly giving it away for free serves as like an empathy litmus for, potentially HR or hiring managers or managers in general for, in the office place quite, harmoniously. It really seems to be a wonderful opportunity as a tool, not just, a politically engaged piece of coding and a game that people can interact with. I definitely understand why it would be important for your viewers / participants to be able to get hands-on.
Yeah.
To hack a Wii or something. What is that? The Nintendo Wii? Wasn't that something?
Yeah. That's a good point. It is something that I'm trying to consider, like how to expand access of audiences. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anyone else here, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you
and
so
listening
much.
to Annie. Have any questions for Annie, please feel free to actually raise your hand.
Or on Zoom.
Or on Zoom, yeah, hey, chat it up.
And I'll also just be hanging out for a bit. After.
And play the game.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't have any questions on my chat right now. A little bit.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We're really happy to host you here at Newburgh at the Live to Beat Showroom. And folks are saying thank you in the chat right now. And thank you to everyone who showed up. Look how beautiful that looks. Imagine this one. Thank you again to all the participants. Say what's up to Annie.
Thank you so much.
We're out.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you for being here physically and and sorry, I mean to talk to my audience, but I don't know sometimes with a camera and like
Video,
yeah, it's like,
Zoom.
I don't know, how do I
Yeah.
make multiple eye contact?
Yeah.